All right, so ladies and gentlemen, the last section for today, A6, that's algebra review of solving quadratic equations. So that's our goal. We're going to learn different ways to do it. We're going to do factoring, what's called completing the square, and then the quadratic formula. Okay, for us to remember how to do this, we look at the quadratic equation. So quadratic equation is ax squared plus bx plus c.
Oh boy.
What's that, Jackson? Are we good? You all right, bud?
Just cut out there a lot.
Oh, nice. All right, so I'll say it again. Ax squared plus bx plus c is our quadratic equation. The first term is the quadratic term. If I cover it up, then I have a line. So it's linear is the middle term. And if I cover these two up, then I have a constant term. Okay, constant is just a straight line going across. You don't have to memorize those, but that's what we got. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is solve by factoring. When we're solving by factoring, we always want our stuff equal to 0. So we have that with example 1. We've got x squared plus 7x plus 10 equal to 0. And then we factor. We know we just talked about that in the last section. So now we're applying it. Factors of x squared are x and x. And then what are factors of 10 that add up to 7? What do you guys got there? What are factors of 10?
5 and 2.
5 and 2. Fantastic. Boom. Okay. So now we use the zero product property idea. The zero product property says if I have A times B equal to 0, then either A has to be 0 or B has to be 0. That's called the zero product property. So if I have two numbers multiplied together equal to 0, one has to be 0, right? Because 0 times anything is 0. So that's where I set each one of these guys equal to 0. I set x plus 5 equal to 0 or x plus 2 equal to 0. And I subtract. And I get two solutions, -5 and -2. Now, you never ever have to do all this work. You can easily just go right here, see x plus 5, and do the opposite, -5. X plus 2, -2. Okay? 99% of the time with these quadratics, you're going to get two answers. Okay? So quadratic has what we call degree 2. The largest exponent is a 2. 90% of the time, you're going to get two terms. Sometimes you only get one, and sometimes you even get none. Okay? All right. I do want to talk about example 2 here. Any questions on 1? All good? So let's take a look at the next example here. I've got 3x cubed plus 5x equals 2x. Okay? Again, the first thing is I always want my stuff equal to 0. So I want to subtract this 2x over. So I'm going to write in descending order, I have 3x cubed plus 5x squared minus 2x, and that's equal to 0. Okay? So then we go through the process. We go through the process of factoring. First rule factoring is looking for those GCFs. And I take a look, they all have what, an x? You can take an x out. And that leaves me with 3x squared plus 5x and then minus 2. We always look to factor further. We got a trinomial, so we factor that guy just a touch further here. Don't forget about the x out in front. Factors of 3x squared are 3x and x. And now we got to do factors of -2. This is where it gets tricky. This is where guessing and checking is really important. So we take a look at -2. It could be 2 and 1, 1 and 2. And it could be plus, minus, or minus, plus. We got a lot of different scenarios. Okay, does anybody have the right way to factor these guys? What do we got? Where do we put the 2? Where do we put the 1? Where do we put the plus? Where do we put the minus?
I know you put the 3
and the 1 together and the x and the 2 together, but I'm still figuring out the plus and minuses.
Okay, so that's going to give us up to 5x, right? This is going to be a positive 6. Inners is 1x. What do I want? Do I want to subtract the 6 or subtract the 1 to get 5? Subtract the 1. So that's going to be a minus sign there. So negative 1 times x is negative x. And then this is the plus 2. So that's awesome, Bella. Fantastic. So we go through the process and we solve this thing, right? Almost done. There are 3 things that we got to set equal to 0. So if this guy has an x, we set the x equal to 0. If there was no x there, let's say you just factored out like a 2, you don't set 2 equals 0 because that 2 equals 0 doesn't make sense. You're trying to solve for x. There's nothing to solve them. Okay? We work on the next one. I've got 3x minus 1. Some people like to write that one out. You do not have to. I would add the 1 and then divide by 3. So I would get 1/3 there. Just opposite sign, and that's your divisor. That's what you're going to divide by. And then last but not least, opposite sign, x plus 2, I'm going to get negative 2. So x equals negative 2. Final answer, 0, 1/3, and negative 2. All right. Any questions there? So that's one of the tools to solve quadratic equations is to go ahead and factor that thing and then set equal to 0. The next thing we need to be able to do is solve by the square root method. Okay? This is kind of different where we don't want it equal to 0. We want our squared term equal to a number. So we want to isolate the squared term. So I get x squared equals 9. And now I square root both sides. That's why it's called the square root method. And we get x equals 3. And I always say, don't forget the plus or minus. Remember, this is a quadratic. We should get 2 solutions most of the time. Okay? So final answer, I should get x plus 2. Maybe make note to yourself. Don't forget the plus or minus. Because you guys always look at your notes, right, before quizzes and tests. So don't forget that plus or minus. I'm a highlighting kind of guy. Maybe you're a highlighting guy or gal. I always like to look at that stuff. It gets my eyes looking at that important thing that I always forget. All right? You want to forget stuff, right? You don't want to forget your son at the gas station like my dad did when I was a kid. You don't want to forget plus or minus signs. Tear, yeah, still scarred for life. I'm 39 years old. I never let it go. Don't forget your plus or minus sign. Don't forget your kid at the gas station, right? Jillian's laughing. She's in bed like, oh my gosh, that happened? Yes, that did happen. My dad left me at a gas station. I had to go to the bathroom, and they were out of gas. So he left and left me in the gas station bathroom. He wasn't even thinking. Oh, man. That's all right. I'm still here. All right, I got another one here. Last example for square root method. You guys are like, what is going on? I take a look. I've got x plus 3 quantity squared equals 25. This time I have a quantity squared. Well, I'm ready to use the square root method. So I square root. I get x plus 3 equals, the square root of 25 is 5. But Mr. Gotch, don't forget the plus or minus. That should be plus or minus 5. And then we solve. We subtract the 3 over. So final answer, you can simplify 5 minus 3 is 2, and negative 5 minus 3 is negative 8. We get our two solutions there. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's the square root method. So you have two techniques now. We have factoring, square root method. The square root method is what we use to help us through completing the square. So you had to learn this one before you can do the next one. Okay? Only a few more examples, guys, and we're almost done. You guys are doing awesome. I know this is not easy. I'd rather be in class right now, but you guys are doing awesome. All right, so now example 5 for me, I have x squared plus 10x minus 24 equals 0. Okay? We are going to get ax squared plus bx, and that c we're going to move over using addition or subtraction. So we're going to subtract or add that c over. Okay? So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and add 24. So now I have x squared plus 10x, leave some room, and that equals 24. Okay? Now what we're going to do is we're going to take our b value, the number in front of x, we're going to divide by 2 and square it. And we're going to add that number to both sides. We're going to take b, divide by 2, and square it. Okay? So I'll write that off to the side. B divided by 2. Let me get it a little nicer. B divided by 2 squared. So the number in front of x is our b value. We take the 10. We divide by 2 and square it. 10 divided by 2 is 5, right? 5 squared is 25. So I add it right there. Okay? All right, so this is where I got to show you, okay? If I was in class, I'd be doing this, okay? An equation is a scale. You guys know a scale, right? You put weight over here, and it goes down, right? So an equation is a scale. It's equal on both sides. Well, if I had 25 pounds over here, I go, whoa. So now I got to add 25 pounds over here. Whoa. And now it's equal. All right, so people always forget to add to both sides. All right, so you can't ever forget that. Now, Mr. Gotsch goes and does that whoa thing. If you add it to one side, you must add it to the other. You got to keep it equal. Okay? All right, we do a little simplifying. We do a little factoring. We factor this guy. Factors of x squared or x and x. Factors of 25 that add up to 10 should be the same number. In this case, plus 5 and plus 5. This is why it's called completing the square, because we can write it as a quantity squared. That's why it's called completing the square. We add this side up, 24 plus 25, we all know is 49. Now do you see the square root method? We square root both sides. We get x plus 5 equals the square root of 49 is 7. Mr. Gotch, he says, don't forget the plus or minus sign. So now we have x plus 5 equals plus or minus 7. Right? And then last but not least, we go ahead and subtract that 5 over. Final answer, 7 minus 5 is 2. Negative 7 minus 5 is what? Negative 12. Boom. Again, completing the square is a technique that we can use. We could also just factor this thing, right? We could have came up with factors of negative 24 that add up to 10. 12 and negative 2 would have worked, right? Completing square is not great to use, especially if this number here is an odd number. Let's say that was like a 7x. Well, then I would have to go and take 7 divided by 2 and then square it, and then I would be having a fraction or a decimal. Okay, so at any point, this is an odd number. There's no way you could pay me enough money to do this by completing the square. That's where no matter what the directions say, if it's an odd number, just use the quadratic formula or try factoring, okay? And that's the last thing for today is the quadratic formula. Before we move on, do you need to see one more example of completing the square? Are you guys good? Are we all right? I'm seeing thumbs up. You're like, this is not too bad. Again, you can look at the video again. This will be videoed. We're recording right now. All right, let's do the last one. Quadratic formula. You guys want it. Here we go. One more example. Use the quadratic equation idea. Again, we get our stuff equal to 0. So always want our stuff equal to 0. I'm going to go ahead and subtract this 12x over. And you want stuff in descending order, so the power of x gets smaller and smaller. So this is where I'm at. 2x squared minus 12x minus 26 equals 0. Okay? Now, if you like working with smaller numbers, see if there's something you can divide all these guys by. You don't have to do this. It just makes the multiplication and stuff later. So I'm going to divide everything by 2. And now I've got easier numbers to work with. Don't have to do this. You could just use those numbers as you want. Okay? All right. Quadratic formula. You've seen this before in Algebra 2, maybe at the very end of Algebra 1. Here we go. Let me sing it to you. You want me to sing it to you? People are shaking their head. Please don't sing, Mr. Gotsch. Please. All right. You guys don't want it. Okay. I won't sing. No, I'm going to do it. I can't. Jackson says sing. All right. Jackson says sing. I'm going to sing. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And then you guys clap. You're like, oh my gosh, Mr. Gotsch, you're amazing. Devin says fantastic. Oh my gosh. All right, so again, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. As we're taking a look, we just need the numbers in front. A is 1, not 1x squared or 1x. We just need the number in front. B is negative 6, not negative 6x. It's just the number in front. And then C is the one all by itself. C is negative 13. Okay? So there is no x's to put in here. These are all numbers we're going to punch in. Okay? Which makes it awesome to work with. So I have negative b, a negative 6, plus or minus the square root of negative 6 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, and c is negative 13. Let me get it so it all fits here. You guys see that good? All right, so all over 2a, 2 times 1. Now, usually I jump right to this step. I'll do the opposite of negative 6 right now. This is usually where I'm at when I'm plugging stuff in. I remember that anytime I square anything, it's always a positive. So remember that number is always a plus inside to start. Then I've got minus 4 times 1 is negative 4 times negative 13. That's positive 52. And then 2 times 1 is 2. So now we've got 6 plus or minus 36 plus 52 is 88. All over 2. Okay? Now my math lab is going to ask you guys to have a simplified answer. So we need to simplify this guy. So off to the side, I've got the square root of 88. You guys want to break that down? 8 and 11, 2 and 4, 2 and 2. Okay, I've got a pair of 2's I can write out. So I got a 2, and then this guy and this guy are left inside of the square root. So 2 and 11, 2 times 11 is 22 left inside. Any questions on the simplifying of that square root? So I have 222 all over 2. All right, last but not least, always want to reduce if you can. So you're looking at the numbers on the outside. If the numbers on the outside all have something in common, then you can reduce them all by the same number. In this case, they're all divisible by 2. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. 2 divided by 2 is 1. And 1 times root 22 is just the square root of 22. Okay? And that's all over 1, which you don't need to write. So final answer is 3 plus or minus the square root of 22. Okay? Again, we're solving quadratics. Eventually, we're going to dive into the graphs of these things. This is where it crosses or touches the x-axis. In this case, a parabola is a quadratic, and you'll see that it crosses or touches in 2 spots. In this case, at 3 plus root 22 and 3 minus root 22. Okay? Ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of our notes. I'm going to shut off our recorder.